Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and a good evening to everyone. On behalf of committee, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. We appreciate you taking time from your busy schedules to join us today. We hope you will learn a lot. We have lined up for you to be fruitful and engaging. Before this webinar series begins, I request all the cooperation from the participants to mute your speaker and recite the Surah Al-Fatiha together. Amin. Okay, we are having a session today from Selangor, Malaysia, which is will present and discuss on the title towards minimum standard and guideline on the provisions of Suraus at petrol station. For your information, this is the second edition, Stock 5 of webinar series collaborations that organized by Shariah in Built Environment, SiBE, Southeast Asia, Built Environment Research Center, SiBE, Faculty of Architecture, Planning and Surveying, UiTM, Shah Alam with Muamalah in Islamic Built Environment MILBE, Academic of Contemporary Islamic Studies AGIS, UiTM, Shah Alam also. So beside today's series, we will have a live streaming from our YouTube channel, Shariah in Built Environment SiBE, FSPU UiTM. We do also upload all the webinars series videos, poster and all the informations in our official website at sites.google.com/view/SiBE-FSPU. The committee also will share our official YouTube channels and the website in the chat box soon. Okay. So I welcome to all the associate professor, doctors towards this webinar. So for our webinar today, the flow will start with the speaker sharing presentations, and it will end up with the open and questions answer sessions. Therefore, any question from the participant, please write in the chat box, or you may ask directly to the speaker. Besides, the committee will share the links of the feedback and attendance form. The cooperation from all participants is greatly appreciated. So let's restart the session with introduce our speaker of this webinar. We have here with us today is Dr. Harlina Md Sharif. Is an assistant professor at the Department of Architecture in the Kuliyyah of Architecture and Environmental Design, K8, University, International Islamic University Malaysia, IIUM. She obtained her PhD from a School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, United Kingdom. Holds a Master in Design Science Computing, University of Sydney. Bachelor of Science degree in Architecture from University of Newcastle, Australia, as well as a diploma in Islamic Jurisprudence Shariah from Al-Quds University College, Jordan. Her research areas include the mosque and Islamic heritage of Malay worlds, digital technologies and 3D visualizations in documentations of cultural heritage, traditional Malay design and technology, history of Islamic art and architecture, and the vernacular architecture in the Malay world. She is an avid researcher that has published widely in both local and international journals. All right, without any further ado, I would like to welcome our speaker, Dr. Halina Sharif. The screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the Hasri. You can hear me clearly?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. Okay, then Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. Thank you for this invitation. And also, to be able to present in front of all of you in this afternoon, Friday afternoon, when people are, just having their minds towards towards the weekend and whatever. So Alhamdulillah, so I'll just go straight, I think, to the presentation. I'll share my screen now. Okay, everyone can see my screen, yeah?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay then, all right, okay. So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Towards minimum standard and guidelines on the provision of Suraus at petrol stations. Okay, before I begin, I would like to inform that this presentation is actually based on a research that we did as a group. I mean, it was just our own initiatives as researchers, and it was actually based on a mentor-mentee arrangement that we actually had from Professor Khairuddin, who is warmly known at KAED as Prof K. So I think this goes back a few years back, but somehow when he invited me to give this talk or to join your webinar, and he suggested perhaps this would be a good idea just to share with all of you what we did, using our own budgets, and then meeting people, just to raise our concerns on the standards of Suraus at petrol stations. Okay, so the all right. Okay, so the contents are here: introduction, study background, problem statement. Yeah. So introduction, yeah. Okay, so as you know, masjid, comes from the word Arabic word sajada, which means to prostrate. And when you add the mim to the front, and then it becomes masjid. That means a place for prostration. So in Islam, when we talk about masjid, it means that we talk about a place that is precisely designed or denoted for solah purposes or for praying purposes. Whereas we also know Islam is very simple in that manner, in which that any place which is clean can be accepted to be the places where we perform our solah. In Malay, according to Kamus Bahasa Melayu Dewan Bahasa dan Pustaka, the word surau refers to a smaller building. Kita tahulah kan, bangunan yang lebih kecil dari masjid tempat orang-orang Islam beribadah, which is a smaller building than a masjid, which is used by Muslims for liturgical activities. So Islam views the act of building a masjid, regardless of its size, as one of the most meritorious acts. So Prophet ﷺ also said, for him who builds a masjid, God will build him a home in paradise. This is hadith from Al-Bukhari. So, during in the history of the Prophet ﷺ and his Sahaba, it is always common for Sahaba to be known or to provide a space, which they call as a masjid. So they used to invite Prophet ﷺ to come to their masjid to perform salah with them. Okay. All right. Okay. So as a place of ibadah, surau or a masjid is expected to provide you with these feelings of solitary, to heighten your taqwa, and then also to enable you to concentrate on this relationship between you and Allah. Yeah, and as a community center, if it is in a bigger scale, then from just a prayer space, then it become a surau. Then from a surau, it become a masjid proper. And then a masjid proper is also known as a community center. So according to Nangkula, it represents the identity of the people. So it is also an evidence of the culture and heritage of its people. Suraus at petrol stations in Klang Valley is a normal phenomenon, considering that performing prayer is mandatory to all Muslims, disregard of one's whereabouts. Klang Valley in particular experiences traffic congestions, thus having to stop by at Suraus at petrol stations is no longer becoming an unusual practice as it is part of our culture and necessity. In the past, having Suraus at petrol stations was not a common practice, but the idea perhaps took lead based on the plus models of having praying facilities for Musafir along the highways owned. However, the initial review suggests that the current conditions of Suraus at petrol stations do not reflect a scenario that represents Malaysia as an Islamic country and the destination for Halal Tourism Global Index. The scenario seems not consistent with the Malaysia Shariah Index, MSI. So based on these initial feelings, I mean, we embarked on this research, mind you, which I think is obvious to everyone here. This is like pre-pandemic situations, yeah. We embarked on this research based on just a hunch. I mean, people have conducted research on the Suraus conditions in shopping centers, for example, shopping malls. And this one here, we focused on, you know, the need for workers, employees like us, you know, that commute from home to work and work from home, and very critical from work to home because that is the time that, you know, during the peak hours after 5, and then sometimes due to jam conditions that we have to stop by, you know, and perform our salah, you know. And it is a well-known fact that suraus that are provided by petrol station owners mainly based on their own initiatives or on their own budget, within their own budgets, and therefore um, the standard of the suraus are not consistent from one petrol station to the other. So here, the suraus at petrol stations facilitate the praying obligation of the Muslims, both musafirs and muqims, the former referring to the long distance journeys of Muslim travelers, while the latter referring to the locals residing in the Klang Valley. Suraus have generally been accepted to provide the most basic and essential praying spaces, and as such, the design is usually made simpler than a masjid. However, regardless of its size, the development of the mosque design from the time of the Prophet ﷺ until today indicates that there are supplementary elements of design features that would become desirable provisions in enhancing one's praying experience for quality salah. Consequently, a study on the hard infrastructure provisions, that is accessibility, design layout, privacy, and etc., and the design feature provisions, for example, supporting facilities and accessories, were conducted. The study inventoried 13 suraus at the petrol stations in the Klang Valley. The samples were selected through a non-randomized convenience sampling. In the study, indicators were developed and thereafter employed in a visual survey to assess, amongst others, appropriateness, suitability, and Shariah compliance. Okay. So the provision of prayer spaces for Muslims in Malaysia are of many kinds, depending on size and locations. According to published materials, there are around 6,393 mosques and 17,700 suraus registered with JAKIM throughout Malaysia. As far as Malaysia is concerned, there is a guideline in the provision of masjid, musalla, and worship places issued by the Department of Town and Country Planning, Peninsular Malaysia, under the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, namely Planning Guideline for Masjid and Surau. That is GP 008, strike A. The Department of Standards Malaysia also produces MS 2577, Architecture and Asset Management of Masjid, to be read together with other 4 codes of practice as follows: MS 1184, MS 2015-1 for public toilets, MS 1525, Code of Practice on Efficiency and Use of Renewable Energy for non-residential buildings, and MS 2426, Planning and Designing for Basement Parking Code of Practice. Okay, based on these provisions, these are the existing guidelines which are related to the provisions of solar spaces. So these are outlined in GP 008-A and also in the policies of Surau construction in the federal territories. Okay, so I won't go in detail, yeah. All right. Also in Malaysian Standard 2577 Architecture and Asset Management of Masjid, whereby the clause were related to terms and definition, general design, considerations for elements of masjid and surau, which also touch on the architecture, building and engineering aspects and maintenance. However, delving into the above guidelines, insofar there are no guidelines on the interior design, furniture and fittings, furnishings of mosque or surau. Okay. Consequently, the current scenario of interiors of mosques and suraus may or may not be consistent with the requirements of the Shariah. Thirdly, other than the masjid or surau proper already mentioned in GP 008/A, there exist no provisions whatsoever for minimum standard in prayer spaces of less than 20 square meters, where a lot of the provisions for salat facilitations in the petrol stations fall under this category. Similarly, there are no guidelines for interior design provisions for prayer spaces provided by private operators such as petrol stations and shopping centres. Given the absence of any references towards a prescribed form of hard infrastructure and design features, there has been a kind of anticipation that the nascent characteristics of a surau would be acceptable, meaning to say that when there's no guidelines and also these suraus are provided, atas ikhlasnya, basically, the shopping complexes punya operators or petrol stations owners, then and also it is considered that these suraus, especially those located at petrol stations, are an emergency sort of like stopovers, for the commuters, then it has been accepted that they should not be, we shouldn't expect so much, from these services. Okay. So based on that, we looked into the relevant literatures. There are three mainly from Islamic sources, which are pertaining to solat requisites, and then also look at newspaper cuttings and current issues, especially pertaining to persons with disabilities, and also relevant legislations, which are all the guidelines which I have mentioned just now, in order for us to come up with a minimum standard requirements in surau design. Okay, so based on this literature, some of the principles are extracted. For your information, there's actually a very good treatise written by Al-Zarkashi, which became my main reference in my PhD studies on the design of mosque, that outlines everything, all of the hadith related to the requirements for performing salah. Yeah, so these are some of them that gives us an idea on the requirements in terms of physical provisions and infrastructures, as well as services, or facilities that are required in performing the salah. All right. So our methodology in conducting the research was we looked into two main areas: design provisions and functional and special provisions. And these are the elements that we looked into, mainly into architectural and design features, security and maintenance, into functional components, minimum spatial requirements, circulation pattern. And from that, we looked into the details of these elements. And in the nutshell, these are the things that we finally summarize them into hard infrastructural provisions, which we call HIPs, and interior design provisions, IDP. And from there, we analyze these features and then come up with the findings and to come up with recommendations for minimum standard requirements in surau and design. Okay. So there are 13 petrol stations altogether which have been inventoried in Klang Valley. The methodology that we adopted was non-random convenience sampling, basically because we live in Gombak and then IIUM campus in Gombak, and the members of our research teams have to travel back to their homes. And these are these two routes that we took, one going towards Shah Alam, and the other one goes towards Bangi. So these three petrol stations have been identified and located on both sides of the routes, yeah, and they belong to four different company petrol stations which are tagged or named as A, B, C, and D. Okay, so based on this research, we looked into the evolution, the design, layout, and maintenance and management of the Suraus in terms of whether or not the ablution spaces are located within the prayer space, or whether or not it is separate. Yeah, does it have like toilets which are within the complex, or is it like separated, or does it have toilets whatsoever? And if the ablutions are separated from the prayer spaces, if the finishers use carpet or tiles, or is there any order? Is there any order in terms of like litter bins or close to where garbage collection areas are? And then in terms of management, as to whether there are places to throw away rubbish, and the timetable for the cleaning of the spaces and things like that. Okay, so these are some of the things that we look at in terms of the design, layout, maintenance, and management. Then the approach, whether or not the prayer spaces is accessible, or ready and easy to be accessed. And look at the design, layout, and accessibilities, whereby, like for example, in here, we look at the pedestrian movements, and then how the surau is being located, whether there's a male surau and female surau. We also look how, usually suraus are located near the parking spaces, and sometimes it is located like, um, at the back of the petrol pumps. And we look at the way that, whether this layout, proves to be beneficial or not, yeah, to the people who wanted to use the surau. And in terms of design layout, whether there's a covered passageway to the surau, we look at the wudu area, and also signage to the surau, for the surau. And from here, we chart the data. And then in terms of signage prior to arrival, we need to select, if we drive towards the surau or towards the petrol station, is it easily to locate where the surau is? Like, when you're driving, and then like we want to select, where is the location? Like, is it usually we tend to, now that we know the pattern, we tend to look at kat mana kat belakang kan, like for example tempat car wash ke, tempat toilet ke, whatever. And then we look also whether like there's a clear signage in terms of driving lane that leads towards the surau. Like for example, if you want to buy McDonald's can drive-through, you will see a very clear sign like, okay, this is drive-through for McDonald's. But is there a clear signage for like, okay, this is the way that you go to the surau, yeah? And then walkway leading towards the surau, signage on the door or wall, so that we know, okay, this is not the signage towards, is it a clear signage, this is a toilet, or is this going to the surau? Is there any facilities for the disabled, for example? And then is there sufficient parking, or is there even a parking dedicated solely for the users of the surau? So from here, we looked like, 38%, or only 5 out of the 13 of the suraus that we surveyed had signage prior to arrival. Meaning to say, when you drive into the petrol stations, only 38% will indicate clearly, okay, we have surau for you, and this is where you go. Okay. And also, of course, there are only 38% that provided clear driving lanes, leading to the surau. On 100% of the survey, the surau that we surveyed provided clear walkway leading to the surau, which is good. And then 77% provide a signage on the door or wall of the existence of the Suraus. However, none of the Suraus provided facilities for the disabled, and 46%, less than 50%, that means less than half of the petrol stations management provided dedicated parking for the users of the Suraus. So here, if you look at this layout, you can see how like, the Suraus are usually located, at the back. Here is the Petrol. We mentioned the name of the company, the petrol station pumps, and then there's a mini mart, and the Surau are located usually at the back, that you have to go at the back, and then it is close near to the cart ingress and egress. And there's an OQ toilet there, but there's no provisions for the OQ. Okay. And this is the kind of access and signage, from the Suraus that we surveyed. This is I think all of us are familiar, but it became interesting when you pointed out in the research that this is a typical sort of like standard signage that we use for Surau, which can be easily purchased, at 7-Eleven, things like that, being placed on the door, and the kind of entrance for the Surau. And the walkway leading to the Suraus. In this occasion here, this walkway is considered to be quite a standard. I mean, not a standard, meaning like okay lah, instead of like some Suraus are located at the back of something else, yeah. Inside, interior design and accessorial provisions are spatially out in orientation. From the findings, 12 out of the 13 Suraus are not built orientated towards the Qibla, meaning to say like this building, I mean the Surau, are usually located in either like, leftover spaces, or according to just the design of the general layout of the petrol stations. Therefore, like our houses also sometimes, it is not specifically designed or built for to perform salah. So you have 77% of the orientation of the Qibla facing towards the corner, as the picture tells you. 15% facing door or passageway, whereas like another 15% facing the wudu area, as you can tell from the picture. In terms of segregation between women and men, only 3 Suraus do not have segregated spaces for each gender, whereas like the other 10 of the Suraus have full height wall to separate between the two sexes. In terms of material finishes, all of the Suraus have tile finishes on the floor. In general, floor was left bare without any proper finishing or covering. Only one Surau uses vinyl floor finish for the prayer space. Okay, for supporting facilities in terms of ablution treatment, the survey found that the design support facilities of the Surau incorporated ablution area within the same space dedicated for the prayers. I mean, 10 sort of like or more, have ablution spaces, tempat ambil wuduk tu within the prayer space, yeah. And the way that they divided the space is by building around 1 to 2 course brick demarcation space. Ada yang half height juga, as you see from the first picture, ada yang full height, but only Surau 12 is found to have no ablution space, while 2 other Suraus have a kind of bendol to separate the ablution space from the prayer space. Okay. In terms of ventilation, hygiene, and privacy, it is found that none of the Surau has air conditioning facilities. 12 of them are equipped with wall or ceiling mounted fan. One Surau, Surau 11, has no fan and only ventilated with high vent. Surau 12 has no windows or high vent, ventilated using a single wall mounted fan. 3 of the Surau surveyed had an unpleasant odors transmitted from prayer mats. Surau 11 has no fan and ventilation is provided through high vents. And ablution space is also located at the external space adjacent to this prayer space, as you can see from the picture there, which is Surau 11. Surau 12 is not equipped with an ablution space, no ablution space whatsoever. Okay. In terms of privacy or safeguarding aura, so this is for ladies, yeah, especially, we find that the surau investigated um, have doors, all of the surau have doors or windows that open out directly towards onlookers from the prayer or ablution space without proper privacy treatment to safeguard one's aura. Only surau 5 has 5 as window blinds. If you look at the plan layout here, that due to the size and the location of the suraus, all of the suraus have openings facing where people pass through or ataupun the pedestrian movements, yeah. And then and because of that, it is difficult, and then most of them do not have any blinds or curtain. So you have the glass shutters, right? And because of that, when we enter the space, when women enter the space, we have to be careful that after we take our wudu, then we have to put on, the proper clothing so that it's not being seen by non-mahram. Yeah. All right. So we also looked into the accessorial provisions in which that, when you look at these pictures, I mean, I think all of us, this is a common normal for us kan, kalau sebelum pandemik ni, meaning to say sebenarnya benda ni biasa, patutnya tak jadi isu untuk kita sepatutnya, ya, because orang kata apa, alah tegal, alah bisa tegal dek biasa, because it is a normal scenery for us, it becomes something which is accepted that a surau should or you should not ask for more, kan, from the operator. So these are the things that we usually see. Like, okay, you have that kind of space for storage. We have a kind of things that you paste on the walls, for information purposes. The sejadah and also the telekong, being placed in a corner and being folded in such a manner. It doesn't matter to us, if those telekong, or the sejadah are being placed, just using just the most basic sort of accessories, because we understood in a sense that, this is just a kind of amal jariyah or incentives or, things which are being provided, for emergency cases such as ours when we need to stop by and perform our salah. Okay. All right. So of course, in terms of decorative elements, most of the surahs have no decorative, it's not decorative at all. So except for 2, I think, only 3 surahs. So yeah, these are the 3 surahs that have any sort of decorations. And you can see it from here, I mean, the decoration are also very minimal, yeah. Okay. So key findings. Positive observation, the phenomena of surahs at petrol stations have benefited the Muslims community locally and globally. Secondly, musafirs and muqims can perform obligatory solat while on the go. So I think we have to commend, the efforts provided by the petrol stations, because due to them we are able to perform our obligatory prayers, even like it is in such conditions. So they do provide spaces for salah, ablution and toilet. There are enough signage, qiblah, surau, etc. There are basic ventilations or natural artificial lightings, and also there are private parking spaces, that allow us to park our cars and then go and perform our salah. Okay. However, the negative observations that we surveyed was that, in general, their lack of order or untidy spaces, they are being provided for people to perform salah, and then also their odor that came from the damp carpets or wet floors, and sometimes because there are no carpets whatsoever, and the floor can be quite slippery, and sometimes the water spilled into the prayer spaces. Critical issues that we see from the point of Shariah. One is that aurah, lack of adequate segregation between genders or views from the outside. Second one is the concept of tahara, suci, toilet and ablution not adequately separated, shoes, slippers, because sometimes you bring the slippers or from the way you perform your ablutions, and then right towards the places where we want to perform solah. There's no clear sort of like boundary and no transition area that you can clean up your feet before you enter into the places where it's supposed to be tahara for you to perform your salah. In terms of maqasid al-Shariah, safety, security, sometimes the suraus are located at isolated spaces. That if you perform the salah after Maghrib or Isha, for example, it can be quite dangerous without any CCTV whatsoever, and then it can be dangerous for ladies, especially at night. The condition of the floor, it can be slippery. And then when you want to perform your salah and then you leave your belongings, the fear for theft. And in terms of design issues, the size of the praying spaces seems inadequate, whereby the guideline says 20 square meter minimum required, and lack of privacy, direct views of prayer spaces from the outside, constraints in usage of praying space due to inappropriate layout or qibla orientation, inappropriate selection of floor finishes, wet odor, safety issues, inappropriate provision of daylighting or artificial lighting consumption versus safety, and then acoustical issue, vehicular and other noises, because like usually because due to space constraints, a lot of the surahs are usually located near the roads that are taken by the cars, to pass through. So we have smoke, we have sometimes garbage smells, and then also noise interruptions. Conclusion and recommendations. Okay, effort given by some petrol station operators to develop surau at their property is commendable. Secondly, study shows that there is zero policy requiring petrol station operators to provide surau at petrol stations. That means all that you have there is solely the initiative of the surau petrol station owners or managers. However, having developed a surau at petrol station would enhance the image of Islam in Malaysia. The implementation of the Malaysia Shariah Index (MSI) and the Islamic hub status of the country. Fourth, initial study indicates that there are inconsistencies in the development of surau at petrol stations, especially in the aspects of safety, security, cleanliness, privacy, gender segregation, provisions of fittings and furnishings, maintenance and management of the suraus. Fifth, this may be critical and require immediate attention. In addition, there is zero consideration whatsoever given to accommodate the requirements of the persons with disabilities. Especially now we are getting into the aging societies. Then I think this should be taken into considerations. 6, however, there exists no formal or published guidelines on what constitutes as minimum standard in the provision of suraus at petrol stations. 7, in the absence of such guidelines, the study therefore serves as an initiative to highlight the need to provide minimum standard requirements for suraus designed for public use, such as those suraus located at petrol stations. 8, finding on the minimum standard requirements would enhance the prayer facilities provided at petrol stations and is expected to implicate other public buildings, namely airports, restaurants, hotels, bus station, shopping complexes, etc. Okay, so these are some images on praying facilities from non-Islamic countries taking initiatives to provide quality praying facilities, such as in Japan. You can see, the kind of facilities, clear, signage, and then, standard materials being provided for prayer spaces. And then here images of several prayer rooms in Singapore, example, hotel, restaurant, and children playing center. And sometimes, the incorporation of, safe energy policies, that allow the, intelligent devices to be installed. Yeah. Okay. So that, viewers, respected viewers, that research was done, as I mentioned earlier on. It was conducted several years ago, couple of years ago, before the pandemics, and now the pandemics has taken us, into 2 years already. And now we have to look into like the solat facilitation is post-pandemic era. Um, Now that we are in this condition where we have this new normal, then to look back at this research and to think of what could be the new normal now given the situations that we are in now. First and foremost, of course, when we look at the minimum square area, I guess, the current surau have like less than 20 square meters, and the guidelines provide for a minimum of 20 square meters, and now given that the pandemic era, whether or not, we'll have to revise and look at the provisions, and then what do we do if we are required to stop by for prayers, after work, given that the situations that we are now, like for example, say for example, we come back and we return to work as normal, and then we are faced with such situations like perhaps this will be a new area or new opportunities for research, because the beauty of Islam is this. I mean, I'm op- I mean, I came from architecture background, of course, and then throughout my years, as you have seen from the introduction of the moderator just now, and I did, you know, um, design sciences or computer in design, for my masters, and my work scope has generally in the technologies and in documentation and of heritage buildings, but my PhD was in mosques, yeah. And the beauty of Islam is this, like it is flexible in one manner, but it can be very detailed in other aspects. But the bottom line is this, like Allah is Jamil, and He loves things which are Jamil, which are beauty. And then there's also another hadith which I always love to quote, that the hadith regarding al-itqan. إن الله يحب إذا عمل إذا عمل أحدكم أن يتقنه, that Allah loves that when any one of you performs an amal, a practice, that you perform it with al-itqan. So al-itqan means professionalism, yeah, meaning to say, like it becomes like something which is professional. You do it according to the standards. You do it like as best as you can. If you do a work of art and then you perform it using the best of craftsmanship, using the best of material. If you design, then you design it to fully satisfy it. And then there's also another concept in Islam in which that if you want to perform an ibadah, that you perform the ibadah according to the requirements, because Allah is specific, meaning to say that, for example, if it requires you to do 33 times of zikir for Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, and Allahu Akbar, then you cannot add more than that. Yeah. So He is precise in certain manners. Okay. So in terms of performing salah, when you are in emergency, for example, how do we do it then? Like perhaps we need to come up with ideas on how we can, just like how we can drive through to collect our McDonald's orders. Perhaps there can be a drive-through service, for solat facilitation, can, whereby that we are able to solat in the cars. Perhaps, I mean, I'm just throwing out this idea, and then while the car is facing the qibla, and then the solat, the wudu, the ablution facilities can be provided, just as how we fill up our tanks with the petrol, for example. Yeah. And what about the hygiene and the cleanliness, the concept of tahara, and then the sanitation frequency, for example. And in terms of accessories, given the situations that we are in now, there should be no shared accessories, like for example, the telekung or the sejadah. You have to bring your own. Or is there a special mechanism whereby, you can purchase those things and then you can throw away later, disposable accessories that you can use, at the places where you can perform the salah. And then in terms of the quality of the interior finishes, what kind of quality are we looking at so that we can satisfy both requirements, design requirements and also the Shariah compliance requirements? Yeah. Okay. All right. I think so. That's about it. I mean, this research was actually like from the initiative of Prof. Khairudin when he was with us. And then this our research member, me myself, Harlina, and Dr. Jamila Osman. Her background is in landscape and visual aesthetics. And Dr. Azila Ahmad Sarkawi, her background was in uh, uh, Islamic urban planning and especially in law. So I think with that, I thank you and would open up for discussion. Okay, thank you very much.
All right. So thank you for the interesting presentation, Dr. Halina. I think especially on the post COVID discussion is very have an interesting output for further research. Yeah. So dear participants, now we have come to the question and answer sessions. So I can see here we have a question from Puan Aisha Hamdan. So he asking regarding the other guidelines for Suraus, as mentioned, is mandatory for the operators to gain planning permission. Back
Thank you.
to you, Dr. Hatta.
Thank you so much, Hazira. Okay, I forgot to mention here. When we came up with the idea to conduct this research, yeah, we identified our potential stakeholders, I mean, to our clients, yeah, because the Suraus, the Suraus which are provided by the petrol station operators are not, they do not have to follow the guidelines because they are under 20 square meters. That was the issue. So because they are under 20 square meters, and then also they are not required by law because they are private operators. Just the same, like for example, if we have a house and then we want to just open up a surau for our own use or for the family use, for example, the surau that we provide is not, does not fall under the guidelines, yeah. So because of that, we saw the gap in the research, yeah. And just because, okay, our argument is this: just because they are not obliged to follow the guidelines and there's no body to control that, doesn't mean that we have to just accept any kind of standard being given to us. Because one is that those spaces or facilities are not used for private members. Like for example, if they're used for just like the staff members, or they're used just for family members, then that's another thing. But then they are provided for the public. So once it's provided for the public, it is concerning, it concerns about the image, concerns about hygienic safety and things like that. For that reason, we find like we need to find a way of providing minimum requirement for private operators, so because of that also, we actually what we have done with the group, because this was a research cluster that we formed by ourselves, and we actually approached MAWIP, Majlis Agama Islam Kuala Wilayah Persekutuan, and we even had sessions with Petronas, petrol station owners, persatuan, yeah, PBD we call it, yeah. And we did, I think all together we presented there were 3 or 4 presentations that we did, to the prospective clients. Just like we throw our ideas, but somehow like we didn't get them to be able to follow through our ideas, so that because sometimes like when you presented to the owners of the petrol stations, because they provided the facilities, out of their own pocket, own initiatives, it was not required for them to provide it. And then for us to comment, to give such comments sometimes can be quite sensitive to them, yeah. So from that perspective, I think some of them can be quite reserved in accepting our proposals, yeah, for the ideas, yeah. Thank you, Prof. You're there. Prof K is there. Thank you very much.
Prof K is here.
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Prof.
Yeah. Well done. Good.
Prof K,
Thank you very much.
anything Prof K? Want to?
Dah lama tak jumpa Prof K.
I was involved in the study with Dr. Halina, so I think it is best that we let others to come up with their views or question or even critique, for example, for improvement. Please.
Yeah. Okay, so I think others the question from the participant, you may unmute your speaker or you may ask directly.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Okay, boleh dengar ya?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm Hikmah Kamarudin from Building Surveying Department, FSPU, UiTM. Okay, thank you, Doctor, okay, for this very, I don't know how to say. Yalah, you bagi talk yang sangat bermakna lah, okay. Tapi berkaitan dengan MS2577, dia belum lagi dimasukkan, belum lagi dimandatorykan. Pada saya that's why kita tak wajibkan lagi dalam local authority. Okay, sebab katakanlah macam MS1184 2014, dia dah being included in the amended bylaw 34A. That's why dia wajib diikuti, tapi di dalam Universal Design Standard tu MS1184 tak ada ablution, tak ada on ablution, tak ada on surah specifically. Tapi pada saya itu bukanlah satu sebab yang mengatakan tidak perlu buat. Kalau tak ada di dalam kalau tak ada tentang surau masjid dan ablution di dalam Malaysian Standard, sebab dia terpakai kepada banyak public buildings lah. So itulah pendapat saya, maknanya sebab dia tidak diwajibkan, tidak jadi mandatory di dalam bylaw lagi. That's why.
Betul. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Doktor ke Hikmah? Yeah, thank you very much for the comments. Yes, betul. Kita pun because the research, when we conducted the research, we are fully aware. I mean, this area, the subject of the research is excluded from any kind of guidelines. Sebab itulah tadi yang I mentioned, because ada 2-3 things. One is that satu is being operated by private operators. Secondly is the size of the spaces which they usually provide is less than 20 square meters. So memang dia tak termasuk bawah apa-apa provisions. And then thirdly, as you mentioned just now correctly lah, just now kan, benda tu belum di-enforcekan lagi kan. Cuma I think this was actually idea from Prof K. He came up with the idea because I think he doesn't like the smell kan Prof K. Order semua tak suka, bau kan, memang betul lah. Kita pun yang kalau kita pakai telekong, kita masuk tu memang it's an unpleasant, but we accepted it because kita rasa okay, alhamdulillah, at least okay, kita ni ada perasaan bahawa okay, at least ada orang bagi kita tempat nak solat, macam tu tau. Cuma I think because when you look from the perspective that actually Majlis Agama Islam and also even Malaysia as a Muslim nation, kita ada provision wakaf, kita ada provision zakat, kita boleh actually channel those kind of resources in order for us to provide a standard provisions, you know, for our prayer spaces. And if we do that, actually it will give back, you know, an image to our religion and our belief system juga. Itu yang kat situ I think the main concern. The reason why we came up with this research. Because kata kalau kita nak just accept it as it is, boleh saja. We can accept it as it is because actually orang tu buat macam tu pun dah dapat pahala dah. Kita pakai dia punya surah pun dah dapat pahala dah. But do we always want to accept it as a norm, or can't we, kalau pendapat I lah macam, can't we respond to the philosophies in Islam that Allah tu cantik, dia suka benda yang cantik, ataupun kalau kita buat benda tu, why not kita buat benda tu dengan al-itqan. That's the whole thing lah. Prof K, you ada nak tambah tak? Prof K yang punya brilliant idea ni.
Prof K, any additional idea or roughly research that you have done before towards these questions?
If I'm going to share what I think, is going to cost you guys the whole afternoon. because I'm very passionate about Shariah in the built environment, and I've been working on it. And mind you, I have no background studies on it. I'm not trained in the Shariah, and it all come around because I was attached with the University Islam Antarabangsa, so we have got to integrate. That's the principle that we have got there. And secondly, I cannot accept the many people believe that what is provided is good enough. Thank you very much. But that doesn't mean that I'm not grateful and we shouldn't be grateful. Don't get me wrong. It's just that sometimes when the provision provided coming to a point as if that it is no longer acceptable. I mean, you question yourself when you perform your solah there, the tahara aspect. Daripada segi suci, for example, najis-najis tu, kita dah clear ke bila kita nak membuat kita punya solat, for example. Dan peace of mind masih kita sedang sembahyang in terms of security, in terms of noise. There are a host of issues. So when we did this as a group, I was trying to prove a few points to my colleague that number one, most importantly, this mentality that when we want to do research, we must have a grant. That is from the academic perspective. I said, no, not necessarily. Many of my works get published, but I don't have a grant. But of course, when you have a grant, it sounds grand. Somebody sponsored your work. Your KPI looks more beautiful. But that doesn't mean that if you cannot get the grant, you cannot do research, because there have been cases where we submitted many grants, but we failed. And the reason for failure may not necessarily because of the way we presented it. Maybe it doesn't meet the requirement, the objective. There's so many, a host of issues there. So that's one thing. I want to prove that we can do research without a grant. And secondly, that tied up with what we were doing at the time, i.e. we are aggressively looking at zakat and wakaf. Our model at that time to move forward is to try and put together a scheme so that all these public facilities related to Islam, at that time we focused on Suraus at Petrol station. Its upkeeping services can be funded through wakaf. But then we have to put together a scheme, and we're trying to get, that time we were trying to get funding from, well, we went to Petronas, we went to Majlis Agama Islam Wilayah Persekutuan, we contacted JAIS, but unfortunately, we were not able to get the necessary funding. But I personally believe that through zakat or wakaf, probably wakaf more appropriate, yeah? And if you can put up a scheme so that people provide their cash wakaf, for example, and the proceed from that, we use to upkeep, to maintain, to clean. But then again, of course, we need to work with expert in the Sharia. In our group then, we have Dr. Azila. So she advised us so that we are not going beyond, you know, because sometimes we may or may not necessarily be aware of the basic or specific requirements of the Sharia. But then again, moving on, when looking at this study, yeah, there are the things that we need to look at in terms of the actual, what they call interaction with members of the public. That is one thing. I mean, I had somebody talking to me about the attitude of Malaysian in general, which is not good really, is that we observe ourselves in public, two important places, but we seldom pay attention to its cleanliness, or from the perspective of Sharia, what needs to be done. Places where we eat and places where we get rid of whatever. So you look at it very carefully. And we need to address this thing, because that's boiled down to the overall requirements of cleanliness in respect of religious performance. I mean, as I said, there are so many issues that I can talk about, and the lack of minimum standard, for example, doesn't mean that there is none available at the moment. We cannot get or put together a movement so that we can start lobbying in order for such minimum standard to be provided. We cannot fault the Petronas people, the Petron people, for example, those people that we met. There is no requirement for them to do that, but they did it on their own. And in some cases, they use whatever space that they don't really think that it is economically viable. You know, okay, put it as a sort of. That's why you see the location at the back, you know, with some issues with security and what have you. So we can help these people if we can come up with standard. Because now if we tell them, kenapa surau kau macam ni? Jadi dia kata, Tadi kita tak ada guideline pun, kita tak ada orang bagi tahu yang kita buat ni tak betul. So
Betul.
then again, the fault goes to us because we happen to know, but we are not sharing what they are supposed to do. So if we say come up with a broad guideline which we attempted to do at that time, at least orang tu tahulah kalau dia nak buat surau kena macam ni, minimum specification dia macam ni, minimum requirement dia macam ni. But we didn't do that. So we ourselves also ought to be blamed. But as I said, I mean, I have a lot of issues when we talk about Shariah, not necessarily negative, but I think I'll stop at that. Maybe the speaker, I mean, Dr. Halina, I mean, I have very high regards with whatever that she's doing, you know, Islamic arts conservation and stuff like that. And she's willing to work with me on this. That is already a plus sign. So we want to make people observe, understand, appreciate, and eventually contribute. So we can start attacking all these small issues, look at it from the perspective of Shariah, and what can we do to improve? People said to me, kau ni bila buat Syariah ni kau nak tukar undang-undang ke, nak tukar kontrak ke? No, that is not the intention. Or some people said because Syariah banyak bersabit dengan law, for example, okay, ini semua untuk orang yang dalam built environment, tapi bukan orang design. Saya kata tak juga. Sebab orang design sangat penting dalam hal ini. Dr. Halina dah proofkan layout, orientation, and that is design. If you give it to me, I'm not good at it because I don't learn those stuff. Okay, wallahu a'lam. I think I better stop at that because I'm very passionate about this subject. Yeah, please, yeah.
Right, thank you, Prof. K. So any information from Dr. Halina regarding Prof. K?
Regarding Prof. K, Alhamdulillah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's good to hear from him. We haven't, because like I used to work with Prof. K under this mentor-mentee thing kan, Prof. K. So yes, we had a good time doing the research because it is. I mean, that's one thing. Betul macam Prof. K kata because we use our own pocket money and then there was no grant whatsoever. It's our own initiatives. And then so when we go to meet people pun macam it's different because then you work as an academics and then you have a responsibility, you know, for the knowledge that you get and then for you to inform the public, you know, on the issues. I think when you don't have grant as such like that, then I think the bukanlah nak kata ikhlas, but then what I want to say, like, you know, your conscience becomes like very clear why you do such things, you know, why you approach people. Ada tadi dekat chat tadi I saw, yes, I think, I mean, kata kalau if Jakim or Jawi or, you know, Mawib, you know, were able to give a provision, you know, like a certain section or certain clausing, like, okay, this money is a wakaf money that will be provided for those operators that they can apply, for example, in order for them to be able to provide a minimum standard punya provision for solat. Then I think, of course, that will help a lot because currently, as we have also seen in shopping centers, for example, you know, okay, you go to shopping center, for example, very, very good example. Like, you know, all of the shops are all glittering, you know, with the colors, aircon and whatever. When you want to go to solat, and then totally different. You know, they give you the back alleys, you go to the garage, bagian parking and whatever, kan? So those kind of things, like, you know, what image does it give to you? That's the main thing, kan? Padahal if katakanlah kita ada religious authorities yang kata, no, okay, this is the standard, and then you can use this money, for example, this is the allocation for it, then of course people will not treat it as such. That's the bottom line, I guess. I think that's the whole thing. So I would like to really thank Prof. Khairuddin for, you know, for initiating and then guiding us during those time, you know, to be able to look at the issues at hand. We as designers, we look at it from, of course, designer point of view, but at the same time, as Muslim, we are also aware that there are provisions of a minimum requirements that are required, you know, for us to be able to apply in our daily activities or daily, daily actions. And also, yes, we did the research together with Associate Professor Dr. Azila and also Dr. Jamila. Yeah, so we all came from different backgrounds, but at the end, like, we were able to brainstorm and then also come up with, you know, some not criticisms, but to be able to just identify and then to stress out, you know, what are the issues that we are required to look at. I think those are our main contributions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Halina. I think, do we have any question from the participants?
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Is Prof. Masran here? Okay, Prof.
Right. First of all, I would like to applaud the effort done by Dr. Halina, and of course, with her mentor, Prof. K. Everyone knows about his passion on this Sharia compliance kind of environment. And I think the problem statement is very clear. Now that the effort being done, the effort that has been made, I think is not only important, but it is really a thing that we should do. If we are not doing this, who else will be doing for us? So I think all the problems, all the things of the observation that has been done is really something that in inverted comma, it goes without saying. Yeah, the state of affairs of how they treat Suraus as just another space, almost like the same quality of, well, I wouldn't say like a store, but we have seen a lot of the quality of the environment, not and the environment, the space given is really just what they call just kalau janji ada, things like that. In fact, some of the newest petrol station, I wouldn't like to mention even the basic things like the orientation. Of course, you have mentioned about orientation, but that simple thing, the designer, who designed the station, it's really just can't be accepted. How come the direction of the Qibla is where the entrance into the space? I wouldn't say a surau pun. It's just a space. I think that is just cannot be accepted. So I think with this kind of guideline that you are actually trying to have, I think that not only be timely, but it is long overdue. And again, I'm not giving you any suggestion, but really something that we are looking forward for something impactful, yeah, that we can actually urge the authorities that by having a certain standard that they can actually follow. And again, I would like to congratulate, and perhaps I'm really interested to be to follow the development of the research that you have done, maybe very soon. With regard to funding, I think that is always the issue when they don't see that this is part of the main national agenda. This is very difficult to get the funding through. I think we should think of something else, maybe someone who is quite generous enough to give. But in the way the initiative that you have done, even without funding, but it can be done. So that's it. If we in our niat that it is part of our contribution, and it will in amal jariyah, inshallah. Okay, that's all for me. Sorry to give a few minutes, which is not really beneficial to a certain extent, but just my opinion. Thank you very much. Prof. K, thank you very much as well, Prof. Congratulations.
Thank you, Prof. Masran. Okay, any question from the other participants, or any point of view regarding this topic? You may unmute your speaker.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Yeah, we have here Dr. Abu Bakar.
Yeah. Assalamualaikum, Dr.
Yeah.
So, your topic is quite interesting because it's actually related with my previous study. Just the place is different. Yeah, Dr. Halina doing the research on the petrol station, but I'm doing my research on at the shopping complex. It's same problem with because in the shopping complex, what we know, dia ada owned by Chinese, and then some of the owned by foreigner. That's why when I did the study on the surau at shopping complex, most of the surau tu is design is like say macam setakat ada and janji ada. Is it?
Betul?
So and if, one more thing is about the Majlis Agama Islam, because my case study on at Johor, Majlis Agama Islam Johor, and also Majlis Agama Islam Selangor. So the problem is different daerah, different district, they have different guide on the surau on design and guideline. So when I meet some of the officer Majlis Agama Islam, so they said they quite to control the design, the guidelines. This is one thing why kalau tengok dia design on the kat shopping complex tu dia tak jaga. So yang I dapat daripada yang from the Majlis Agama Islam, so what they say, kalau boleh every planning on the new building, shopping complex or any building like office, so they want to get involved in this process. So they want I get feedback from the Majlis Agama Islam lah, from Johor. So that's why kalau kita tengok even dekat shopping complex tu, I want the shopping complex at Johor tu, I'm very shocked because kita semayang depan tandas. So dia provide just what partition, just like kain apa dia halang, then kita ambil wuduk kat tandas and semayang pun dekat depan tandas. And some of the shopping complex kita semayang dekat kapak lah. So that's why bila I go to the local authority, so they just provide, they say in Johor dia put the let's say 20 meter square. So you nak letak mana, you letak mana, janji ada 20 meter square je punya size. So that's why I get from the local authority in Johor and also from the Majlis Agama Islam. So what I can sharing this one, I don't know where's the mistake in for the guideline, because kita tak ada exactly yang guideline betul-betul yang boleh untuk local authority take control ataupun untuk kita as a guide ya, untuk sebab kita majlis Muslim, ramai orang Melayu pergi shopping complex, tapi kita tak ada guideline yang strong lah untuk develop kita punya sendiri punya tempat kita semayang tu. So I sharing lah apa yang I did my research 2016 lah dekat shopping complex. Okay, betul?
Betul. Yang penting sekali tu macam okay, for example, katalah ada space tu, for example, okay, it satisfy the 20 square meters. Tapi kalau you perasan tak, there's no guideline for the interior. Interior quality tu tak ada. Yang kat situ tu, because okay, you provide 20 square meters, but then even for masjid pun tak ada. Guideline for interior of the mosque pun tak ada. In Kuwait, I perasan dia dah start in Kuwait. They have this guideline for the interior, kat mana nak letak benda, you know, the qualities or the finishes and things like that. But then in Malaysia memang belum, I mean I don't know about other countries, but in Malaysia memang interior tu tak ada guideline. So I think that's perhaps we can work together, UiTM dengan now that Prof K is already there, and IIUM we come up with a research proposal insyaAllah.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I attend a meeting dengan Jabatan Islam Johor tu. So they want Majlis Agama Islam ni get involved in the planning on the building ke. Dia nak get involved. Setakat ni dia orang tak terlibat secara direct. So hopefully mungkin authority can just cuba macam mana kan. So Majlis Agama Islam ni involved on the kiblat ke, design ke, different matter lah.
Right.
Thank you, Dr.
Right.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bernard.
Thanks.
All right. So,
Dr. Azira, I just want to help a little bit here. I would like to say that we don't want this session to be seen as bashing the providers of surau at petrol station and shopping complex. So we ought to also say that There are good surau at shopping complexes, for example. I can name a few, especially during the prior to the pandemic. For example, Sunway Pyramid, they've got very good surau there. KLCC, for example, they've got good surau there. So the intention is not to bash people, but the intention here is to try and create awareness that we need minimum standards. And we
Betul.
are so grateful that in the context of our study then focus on surau at petrol station. We are very grateful that they provide that provision, because people like me, when I was working at IIUM, I commute from Shah Alam. Most of the time, it is either Asar or Asar and Maghrib will be along the way. Because if I were to wait, I will not be able to make it during the time, Then I experience all these problems. But again, at the end of the day, we cannot just accept the mentality, dia dah bagi dah, kita berterima kasih. But sebenarnya mungkin dia tak tahu yang apa perlu dia buat. So dia bagi je lah dan pandai kau lah. Something like that kalau nak bahasa kasar. So therefore, it falls on us if we happen to know to do something about it. And that's what we are doing. And in this respect, for example, we had our grand plan dulu, tapi dah tak jadilah because it takes time to do this sort of thing, Dr. Harlina. We were thinking of expanding the study so that if we can, we create the minimum guideline and then get it properly endorsed by the expert. And then we want to do a kind of audit so that we can inform them, the operator, for example, based on the standard guideline that has been accepted, approved by the authorities. We look at your surau and this is what are the problems which you may want to improve, for example. And this can then be expanded to look at bigger surau, musola, mosque dan sebagainya, because as what Dr. Halina said, we also realize that there are certain elements within a mosque that there is no guideline. Not that we want to control so that everybody become robotic and rigid, kena ikut ni, tak juga. So we are trying to be as flexible as possible. But the bottom line, when we talk about surau at petrol station, and mind you again, our scope of study is not those petrol stations along the highways. We are very focused in the Klang Valley. Yeah. So based on our study, we discovered this problem and we want to raise awareness. Memang minimum standard tak ada dan minimum standard sangat-sangat diperlukan. So here we look at the importance of the input from the architects, interior designers, planners, so that we can come up with proper design guideline for these places. Wallahu alam. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. K. So I think it's already 8 p.m. So anyhow, I would like to open the last participant to ask or share your any point of view regarding this topic. Okay, before that, I would like to all the participants, you may the secretariat, the community already put the link of the attendance at the chat box, and also we need your cooperation to fulfill our master survey, which is already highlighted the link, the market survey for our new program, Master in Shariah for Built Environment, which is we will close it until 30th of September. So we need your cooperation to fulfill this survey, and don't forget to add the attendance form. Okay, so I open the last questions, or any participant who would like to share point of view. Before we wrap up for this webinar, because it's quite interesting, yeah, because it's involved with the design. Okay,
Thank you. Next.
So far? All right, I think the last question is from the committee, Dr. Harlina, is regarding the, what do you think the challenge to make it from the minimum standard, comply towards to make it the government regulatory and policy design towards the Suraus standard. Do you mean what is the
What's the main challenges?
yeah.
I think first of all the main one is I think awareness. Itu je lah mula-mula I think, because other than that, if people are not aware, people are not sensitive, then they will not take any actions. I think that was the main reason why we started this, to raise awareness that these things have to be highlighted, and then the key players need to take actions kan, macam Jabatan Agama Islam, Jawi, Mawib, and then also, even those who are responsible in providing public facilities, because this one berkaitan dengan the public punya services, yeah. So I think that's first. If people are aware, then it's easy. If people are not aware, then it's our responsibility to raise awareness. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lina. I think beside that, maybe the understanding the authority who involved towards this something like Suraus, shopping complex, and so on, the team who involved in this project or planning should know, is it falls into the JAIB, is it falls into JAKIM, because each Islamic authority itu depends on each stage kan. So
Betul.
that one
Ada
is
separated.
yeah.
Betul. Betul.
Yeah. Because this one is similar towards my previous master research, because I did something like a halal concept towards the FMB. So involves, yeah, I understand how it works towards this.
It's not integrated, isn't it? Like all segregated, like different
Yeah.
different ni semua ada its own ni kan, different, yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so I think Alhamdulillah, finally we came to the end part of this webinar series. So I would like to summarize into a simple citation that I get from the Bakar 2019 during Islam and Confucianism, the second Malaysia-China Youth Civilization Dialogue. He mentions that the Shariah guidance as Shariah design thinking that is combined of both maqasid Shariah and the critical of definitions and functions of Shariah. It should be underlined towards emphasize as injections in any field, So this is citation from his paper on the Shariah design thinking in facing new global reality and civilization relations, that I think is linked in interconnections towards today's webinar series, which is offer better solutions and the alternative to manage the current stream of the world, meaning that we do have a demand and supply chains for the modern world. Okay, especially on this, yeah, it's quite interesting doing part of your description on the post pandemic issue that you are preparing for, Halina. So we would like to say thank you again to our speaker for sharing the informative and interesting talk, beside to our audience for support and cooperations. Before we end up today's webinar, let's close this series with a Surah Al-As, and here we meet for the next webinar sessions, inshallah. Assalamualaikum.
Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Dr. Halina.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Doctor.
much, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Okay, can we have
Thank
a
you, Doctor.
photo session for
Might not be appropriate.
Kenapa,
Prof?
Prof?
Show your camera. It's just like me and Dr. Halina is open the camera.
Being Friday afternoon, as what Dr. Halina said,
All right. So how about the committee and the other
Thank you
participants?
so much, everyone. Yes. Background tak Syariah compliant.
Yeah. All right. Okay, thank you.
Bye. Assalamualaikum.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Lain-lain tak buka mic, tak buka kamera lagi. Ke dah ambil dah gambar.
Tak boleh, background tak soleh.
Background tak soleh.
You just take apa yang ada je.
Ni je kot.
Okay. Okay, 1, 2. Oh, this is here. All right. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Alright, thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks.
Salam.